relentless in the war. The legions in our hearts, shed waters in our balls. The spirit and the flesh, the emotions that arrest. The cerebral will contest, propelling the unrest. Preachers and bandits with means underhanded. The teachers pedantic and lack understanding. So sweep out the sand with the broom in your hand. Stand up, make we burn Babylon. Guess I can give the world to you, the world to you. But the falling of the curtain is for certain. Be careful where you lurking, demon searching. The spirit and the women fight the battle within. Cause I can give the world to you, the world to you. But the falling of the curtain is for certain. Be careful where you lurking, demon searching. The spirit and the women fight the battle within. With the semblance of a blaze, with gratitude and rage, we touch another page with delirious delight, impervious to light. This vitality and might encourages the flight. Preachers and bandits with means underhanded, the teachers pedantic and lack understanding. So sweep out the sand with the broom in your hand. Stand up, make we burn Babylon. Guess I can give the world to you, the world to you. But the falling of the curtain is for certain. Be careful where you're lurking, demon searching. The spirit and the women fight the battle within. Guess I can give the world to you, the world to you. But the falling of the curtain is for certain. Be careful where you're lurking, demon searching. The spirit and the women fight the battle within. The world to you, but the falling of the curtain is for certain. Be careful where you're lurking, demon searching. The spirit and the women fight the battle within. Cause I can give the world to you, the world to you. But the falling of the curtain is for certain. Be careful where you're lurking, demon searching. The spirit and the women fight the battle within. In the den of iniquity, vicinity no pretty, calamity fi hit we any moment, what a pity. Tomorrow never certain, what dwells behind the curtain? The face of evil smirking, with that shifty eyes averting. It's not a steady bubble, could either pop or topple. Many will fall and stumble, let the dozers gather rubble. From LA to Colorado, Guinea to Burkina Faso, cannon could reach the towers and the troops will storm the castle. I say, run, run, come, make we get it. Because the peace that is bestowed upon the meek is overrated. So run, run, come, make me get it. Calling all your daughters and your sons, we come forget it. I say, run, run, come, make me get it. Because the peace that is bestowed upon the meek is overrated. Lord, run, run, come, make me get it. Calling all your daughters and your sons, we come forget it. With the rubble steady rising, and hearts are compromising. Conditions here are stifling, making evil appetizing. The fists are steady forming, and countenance is falling. Defenses are withdrawing, possibilities are falling. In these circumstances, evil will make advances. Pick up your sword and lances, and be sure to take your stances. Victory is never promised, the battle is upon us. Gather the brave and honest, and the righteous in your corners. Go. Run, 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 make we get it. Because the peace that is bestowed upon the meek is overrated. So run, run, come, make we get it. Calling out your daughters and your sons, we can't forget it. I say, run, run, come, make we get it. Because the peace that is bestowed upon the meek is overrated. Lord, run, come, come, make we get it. Calling out your daughters and your sons, we can't forget it. Because the peace that is bestowed upon the meek is overrated. So run, run, come, make we get it. Calling out your daughters and your sons, we come fi get it. I say, run, run, come, make we get it. Because the peace that is bestowed upon the meek is overrated, Lord. Run, come, come, make we get it. Calling out your daughters and your sons, we come fi get it. Run for the hills, let the will lead the mind. For living is the thrill with the doubt left behind. Amidst all the wicked, there is beauty to behold. We are fearless and intrepid from the depths of our soul. The hands of the steady glean the rose from the bone. The sweat of the weary brings us closer to the dawn. The motion of the wheel brings the light to the mind. Be aligned, it's divine. Run, run, come, make we get it. Because the peace that is bestowed upon the meek is overrated. So run, run, come, make we get it. Calling on your daughters and your sons, they come we get it. I say, run, run, come, make we get it. Because the peace that is bestowed upon the meek is overrated, Lord. Run, come, come, make we get it. Calling on your daughters and your sons, they come we get it. Run, run, come, make we get it. Because the peace that is bestowed upon the meek is overrated. So run, run, come, make we get it. Calling out your daughters and your sons, we come forget it. Run, run, come, make we get it. Because the peace that is bestowed upon the meek is overrated, Lord. Run, come, make we get it. Calling out your daughters and your sons, we come forget it.
The will to power. Audio test 1 2. Yes, yes, yes. Sound check. I see the bubble around the head. I see the bubble. Are we getting the sound loud and clear, ladies and gentlemen? How is the sound? Let me go ahead and. How's the sound coming through, ladies and gentlemen? Clear, clear. Thank you very much. Shout out to Soul Provider Speak, shout out to Leda, shout out to everyone in the house this evening. And it's past 2 a.m. over here in Accra, Ghana, but you know, we do what we do, don't we? Don't we? I'm not going to be quick on the draw with regards to reading the super chats and so on and so forth. Yes, yes, I do expect the super chats to be coming in. The will to power. This is one of the phrases most readily attributable to Friedrich Nietzsche, my favorite philosopher, definitely my favorite writer in the world of philosophy. Him and Arthur Schopenhauer are my favorite writers in the world of philosophy. And also, close to being some of my favorite philosophers. The will to power is something we're going to be elaborating upon today. What is it? What exactly is that idea? It is a very simple idea. But before we get into that, I would like to welcome everybody. Welcome, 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 ladies and gentlemen. My name is Ike Ogiyama. Welcome to my channel. And over here, we talk about being better and doing better with a strong emphasis on doing. So, as usual, we like to keep things simple, measurable, actionable, and intuitive over here. So, we're going to try to break down this philosophical idea. Not systematically broken down by Nietzsche, because systematically breaking things down was not Nietzsche's style. He was more of a poet than a philosopher. But let me go ahead and say this at the onset. We did a video on the basic work, on the magnum opus, or the the fundamental writing, I would say, foundational work of Arthur Schopenhauer. It's called The World as Will and Idea. That word there, will, which Arthur Schopenhauer introduced, is what Nietzsche elaborated upon. Will, okay, and you bear with me here for a second, ladies and gentlemen. Let me go ahead and talk about the will vis-a-vis Arthur Schopenhauer so that we can get right directly into this and we can start to break it down, start to see how it helps us perceive the world and also helps us perceive philosophical works. Because Nietzsche was a great unmasker of what we call dogmatic thinking. Thinking about the true, the good, and the beautiful. He unmasked truth and said, hey, 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 watch out when people tell you about truth. Life is primary to truth. Psychology is primary to philosophy. But before we get all to that point, you see, go and watch this video, okay, later on after this stream when you get a chance. The first series on What Ike Reads was a book called The World as Will and Idea, or The World as Will and Representation by Arthur Schopenhauer. And will, in that case, means this. It means that the world can be seen from two perspectives, as far as our subjective experience, as far as how we perceive the world, as far as who we are, as far as the whole experience of the subject, of a human being. The world comes to us in appearance, right? We see the Perrier bottle. I can touch it, I can sense it. In other words, I have senses vis-a-vis the Perrier bottle. Well, actually, this one's Pellegrino. Regardless, my sparkling water. Go ahead, open that. So the world appears to us, right? It appears. We perceive it. We take these percepts in. We form them into concepts and so on and so forth. That is the representation part of the world as will and representation. So that's the representation part. But he is saying there's another aspect to the world, which is you could always ask, hey, I see the water, I touch the water, I can taste the water, I can feel the water. Also the glass. But what is the water in and of itself? In other words, it's a metaphysical question. Metaphysics means just underlying physics. In other words, physics studies what we can perceive, what we can measure. We build concepts around it and so on and so forth. But one could always ask, what is the water in and of itself? What is the nature of the water? What underlies the physics? What underlies? In other words, meta means foundational, underlying. That which is beyond what is being talked about. That's what meta means. So, we see the water, we touch the water, we taste the water, we feel the water, all that kind of stuff. But you could also ask, what is the water? And he says, hey, we get the world through two ways. Arthur Schopenhauer, that is. One way is through the representation, right? The representation, you see, you touch it, whatever, it comes to you. It represents itself to you, right? And then the other way, there is one object that we can perceive from the inside. That object is us. And we perceive that insideness as will. Can I get a 1 in the chat if you get the point. That you can talk about mass, velocity, this, that, and the other. You can talk about the sun. It appears to me in this way. It's on the northern side of the sky. I can see the rays and so on and so forth. That's a representation. But what is it to be the sun? In other words, what is the sun from the inside perspective, right? The question may not make sense, but it is a question that haunts us anyways. Can I get a one in the chat if we understand that question? Right? Yeah, I see the sun, but what is the sun? What would it be like to be an atom or the sun? And he says, hey, one object, which is us, we can perceive from the inside. And what is will, what we perceive as our drives, that will to eat, to reproduce, the will to go out there and work and conquer, whatever it is your will is willing at the moment. How about if the fundamental laws of nature, gravity, electromagnetism, the strong and weak force, so on and so forth, the four fundamental forces, how about if those are also like will? In other words, the word will is not your will, what you may call free will and so on and so forth. He is talking about the world from the inside out. In other words, the four fundamental forces of nature would be will, for example. Those would be fundamental will, for example. That gravity is willing this cup to fall down to the center of the earth. That is the will of gravity. Again, the world as will is representation. Go and watch that video from Arthur Schopenhauer. And I'm talking about it because it is that word will that then Nietzsche takes and elaborates upon. Not systematically, but does it in his Nietzschean way. Excellent way of doing things. But world as will and representation. The world represents itself to us. I see the glass, I see the sun, I feel it. These are representations. It's presenting itself to me. It has a mask on. I can only perceive it through my perceptions. I can only perceive it through the subject object interaction. I have to be an object. It represents itself as an object to the subject. But how about what the world is from the inside? And he says, hey, we know one object from the inside, and that is us. Now, it's a limited kind of knowledge from the inside, but there's this thing that we call will. Okay? There's this thing that we call will that moves us. How about we use the same kind of concept for what moves the glass down, what moves the electrons, the electromagnetic force, the gravitational force, the strong and weak force in the center of the atom. Hence, and let me go ahead and see what's going on here. I did ask for ones, and I see ones in the chat. Indeed, indeed, indeed. The world from the inside. Yeah, this volume is low, and I can I also let me go ahead and let me try something real quick.
Microphone check. Microphone check. Now, my apologies, ladies and gentlemen. My apologies, ladies and gentlemen. Is this sound good enough? Because it seems like I will need to restart my computer in order to use my fancy microphone, but we are going to go ahead and use the webcam microphone, and next time we will have more crisp sound with our fancy devices. But for now, oh, I think I know exactly what was going on. Shout out to the people in the house. Shout out to all the people in the house. Let me make sure one more setting is good to go. And as I make sure that setting is good to go, I'll continue to talk about the will. The will, again, is the opposite, the other side of how the world comes to us. We experience the world in two ways. One is through representation. In other words, your senses. Everything which you call an object, everything that you experience, all filters through the subject. There's always a subject-object dichotomy. All that stuff which you see out there. But then there is a question as to what is the world from the inside perspective? There is one thing that we can experience from the inside perspective, that is us. We do feel this thing called will, drives, instincts of different kinds that move us to do what we do. Now, how about we use the same concept, the same kind of idea, the same metaphor, the same analogy for things such as gravity, such as electromagnetism, and so on and so forth. In other words, the more fundamental aspects, the more rudimentary aspects of nature that we observe, right? How about if we say those are also like will, but a little different, if you will? Haha. Indeed, indeed, indeed. Indeed.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
All right. So I think we should be good. I think we should be good. And with that said, I'm going to go right ahead and bust out the PowerPoint. I'm going to go right ahead and bust out the PowerPoint so that we can begin to talk about this idea of the world as will and representation. Nicer in the house. Hey, Nicer. How's it going? How is it going? Shout out to BA in the house. Shout out to, I think I saw Soul Provider Speaks earlier. Okay. Practitioner in the house. Black Curls in the house. Love yourself. Indeed. Nice to see you guys. As usual. As always. So, let me go ahead and share this, and we'll get directly into what we need to get directly into today. Okay, let's go ahead and share this. I love this little picture, by the way. The little dog. The little dog in the tux. The will to power. So, as it is always the case in this channel, okay, we go ahead and we break things down with the words first and so on and so forth. You know, we are trying to get to the point where we can grok a concept, feel a concept, intuit a concept, and the beginning of that usually comes with unpacking the words. Take, for example, last time we talked about street smarts.
And rather than just talk about street smarts, which is a bag, a concept, a word, right? A word is a border around a concept, right? It's a border. Some borders are too big, some borders are too vague. We want to be able to create smaller, perhaps more precise borders, right? So we took street smarts and we said, hey, how about we use some other words like jungle survival, blah, 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 blah. And then we came up with a working definition. And how about we say it is about taking effective action in a competitive and dangerous environment. And it's like, okay, cool. And then we break down effective action, we break down competitive, we break down danger. So in this particular case, we're going to do the same kind of thing. We're going to do the obvious, that is, okay? We're going to ask ourselves about certain definitions, okay? Such as the will. Now, before coming here, I on purpose introduced the Arthur Schopenhauer book, The Philosopher. And again, even if you've watched the video before on the world as will and representation, I advise you to watch that again. It is and I recommend that book, by the way. So go watch the video, and if you're into it, get the book. It's one of the last great systematic philosophies, that's out there before postmodernism and everything started breaking down and so on and so forth, okay? Now, the will, as we just talked about, is a metaphysical and primordial driving force. And we talked metaphysical, we know what metaphysical means. Metaphysical doesn't mean woo-woo. And again, words get bastardized, the borders get stretched into places where it was never meant to be. Meta means what undergirds or what's above, what's beyond. Meta is beyond. So beyond the physical, okay? Like we said, you can talk about what we can measure, what we can see, what appears to us as subjects, right? The objects that appear to us as subjects. But what is beyond that? And the way of being beyond is to ask, well, what is it like to be the glass? Or what is the glass like? What is its nature in and of itself is the way the sentence usually is also constructed. What are things in themselves as opposed to things to us? Okay? And let me get another one in the chat. Again, this is we're talking a little bit of philosophy. Not to scare anyone away. But when we do these kinds of things, I like to ask for more ones than usual, because the point is to be able to break things down. So we're taking everything step by step, and we're moving along, and we're gaining intuition as we go along. Otherwise, it's kind of pointless. So the world as it appears to us versus the world as it is in itself is this dichotomy which we're trying to draw here, okay? And the will is the world in itself, okay? The metaphysical and primordial driving forces, electromagnetism, okay? Gravity, all that stuff. You could just call it will. Hey. You could call it the will of God if you want to, right? Well, we get the point. Because when we use the word will, we can now get a good intuition for it, okay? We might be completely wrong, but we're no more or we're no less wrong than when we have no intuitions for it whatsoever. We have no working theory, have no way of analogizing or creating metaphors, right? So when we say that life, okay, this particular phrase that Nietzsche is well known for, that life is the will to power, the word will there is not your will, right? Not your complex, highly, perhaps even conscious, or maybe free or not free will. It's talking about a primordial and metaphysical driving force, okay? That is what the word will there means. And we'll break it down, okay? We'll get down to the nitty gritty and so on and so forth. And by break it down, I mean make it really clear, as we tend to do over here. But we're just going through some word games. We like to start with the words first, as I always do, like we did earlier again for the street smart stuff. And then power. Power is simple. By power, we mean the physics definition of power, okay? Power is the capacity to do work. Okay, there's this thing called work. Work has to do with forces moving stuff. Electromagnetic fields generating forces, moving electrons and photons. In other words, things within the electromagnetic spectrum, it moves those things around. Gravitational forces moving masses around. Okay, you with your chemical forces in your muscles moving weights around. Work, okay, is moving stuff around, and power is the capacity to do work. Okay, it's how much work you can do in per unit time. If you wanted to just get really, if you wanted to get really, we wanted to be physicists about it. Okay, but basically it's that. It's the capacity to do work. Okay, the capacity to use force, the capacity to move mass, the capacity to move electrons. Okay, you've heard of horsepower, right? Horsepower is 550 foot-pounds per second. That means 1 horsepower is you moving 550 pounds through a distance of 1 foot every second. So it's being able to move stuff, the rate of moving stuff, the capacity to move stuff, and if you have more horsepower, then you can move that thing faster, right? So 2 horsepower will be, 1,100 pounds foot per second, moving 1,100 pounds through a distance of 1 foot every second, right? So it's about moving things, and we're using the mass analogy here, but, electromagnetic fields move electrons around and so on and so forth. Electric fields, blah, blah, blah. Not to get too complicated, but the capacity to do work is all we're talking about here. Okay, the capacity to do work. So that will is the primordial forces, the will itself, the will of God, the will of gravity, the will of electromagnetism, that thing which moves the world in and of itself, that which makes the atom, okay, that kind of a thing. And then life. We're not going to define life. We're going to talk about what life does and how it relates to this will to power thing. Okay? So far, so good, ladies and gentlemen. Are we good? Are we good? Shit, we here. And he comes in and he says, we here. Dr. Thunder in the house. Dr. Thunder in the house. Representing the force of thunder. The Honorable Chap Whip in the house. Make sure you catch us on the 9th. We'll be doing part 2 on our management. How to manage people series on the 9th. I believe it's the 9th, right? So, life now. Because again, we're not talking about you necessarily. We're saying all of life. Just like when we said will, we're not talking about your will. We're talking about the will of gravity itself. We're talking about that kind of thing. We're talking about the world inside, right? Fundamentally, it is a metaphysical proposition, whereby metaphysical just means beyond physics, not bullshit that people say in bullshit locations, okay? Take this, I don't know, this may be paramecium or whatever, but it's some single cellular organism. It's got flagella, those little hairy things with which it moves and senses around. Now, with this thing, what does it do? Okay, what does it do? One thing that it does is it differentiates itself from, in other words, it creates a border. Okay, they have lipids or oils, and these are a basic organic compound. Okay, these form the cell walls of life. Well, why? Well, because it can create a border, right? We know that oil can kind of separate, if you want to create a border, like things such as hydrocarbons, plastics, and so on and so forth, they're good containers, right? But those hydrocarbons, oil is a basic hydrocarbon, okay? And these are organic compounds, carbon compounds. But this thing separates itself, okay? It wants to separate itself. It wants to fight against the urge to disintegrate. There is this will in the world towards entropy, towards the expansion of the world, towards disintegration. Things want to break down. Life, our little friend over here, our little guy over here says, no, Let's try to stop that. I'm going to create a border between the outside and the inside, okay? And I'm going to use certain very basic electromagnetic, okay, and other kinds of forces like diffusion, osmosis, right? To take things from the outside and bring them in and keep things that I don't want from getting in, okay? So it is doing work. It is moving things around for its own ends. So far, so good, right? And this is basic prokaryote or eukaryote single cell organisms. They create a border. They fight against the disintegration of themselves. They move things around. We can begin to see this whole kind of thing. It is using will. Okay, it is using will. It uses metaphysical will, as we already talked about it before, as a means of power. It uses metaphysical will meaning your basic fundamental laws of nature, that which makes the universe what it is, gravitation, electromagnetism, and all the manifestations of electromagnetism, right? Because when we say electromagnetism, the fact that this glass doesn't fall through my hand is a manifestation of electromagnetism as well. Because it's the interaction between the atoms, right? It's electromagnetic interactions between the atoms that makes things solid, you know, that makes one thing oppose the other thing. It's not some kind of, it's not what we might think it is, right? What we call solidity is an electromagnetic interaction, right? So electromagnetism is a big thing. It does a lot of stuff, not just moving electrons around and so on and so forth and working your batteries. But a life, tiny little single cell organism is using these very fundamental osmosis, diffusion, okay? The chemical properties of oils or lipids, basic organic compound which forms its border. One of the electromagnetic properties is that it's semi-permeable. It can let certain things in, keep certain things out. It's using these very basic things in order to fight, in order to gain power against certain things. It fights against entropy and disintegration. It fights, uses power to usurp and consume resources, right? Now, as you may suspect, I'm going to do a quick leap here as to, well, why is any of this fundamental? Why is any of this, let me use that word, why is it philosophically interesting? Well, typically in philosophy, you start with this metaphysical kind of thing. And then where we're trying to always get to with philosophy is ethics. Ethics/politics. You know, politics is just big ethics. Ethics is just, you know, ethics, politics, that kind of a realm. How do we live? What do we do? What is the good life? What is the good society? What's the relationship between the good citizen and the blah, the blah, the blah, the blah? That's where things typically go. That's where things get interesting. Like, what do I do with this? But your metaphysical premises, can I get a 1 in the chat? If we're clear on this, your metaphysical premises definitely inform your ethics down the line, and even your aesthetics and certain other things, okay? Fighting against entropy requires energy. Exactly. Fighting against entropy requires energy. You need that energy, you need that power. It literally is willing, using the fundamental wills and arranging them in a certain way to fit its will. Now, there's this new will in the world. We have this basic will, electromagnetism, gravitation, strong force, weak force, the basic kind of physical things that we can conceptualize. And then there's this new will called life. But it is just a arrangement, a utilization of these fundamental other wills, right? That is the idea. Dr. Thunder, Dr. Thunder, Dr. Thunder. You got to check out the replay. So, Nicer, you're going to need to take over as the chat whip. Okay? And whip him into shape. Tell him to click the likes, hit up the Cash App, so on and so forth. So, I see a 1 from Black Curls. That means we are following so far. That means that we are following so far. Power to usurp and consume the resources which gives it energy, which gives it the ability to do its thing. Again, there is this will, which is an arrangement of fundamental wills, metaphysical will, right? Fundamental metaphysical wills, again, are the laws of nature. Just call it that. Gravitation. Gravitation is a will. Okay, think of it as a will. It wills things to come together, masses, in accordance with some inverse square law and such and such and such. But it is a will insofar as we try to conceptualize it in this particular frame. The frame started by Arthur Schopenhauer, then developed by Friedrich Nietzsche. So our friend over here, our little cellular cell organism, what's his name? I don't know. Shall we call him Black Curls? Will you be offended, Black Curls, if our little single cell organism is called Black Curls? Or maybe it's Young Swift. So Black Curls over here, Black Curls tries to, again, by using the fundamental laws, electromagnetism, it has this shell around it. The shell has chemical properties, which are properties about atoms, which are fundamentally about electrons and the arrangements of electrons, to keep certain things out, okay? That's why one of the fundamental organic compounds is oils. You got oils, you got proteins, you got carbohydrates, and then you have nucleic acids. Those are the four, I can't help but, throw little, people call it STEM, people call it whatever, but it's just, these are just fundamental things that we all know, but we just remind ourselves of it. We know that there are things that you only find in life. That's what organic compounds mean. They're produced by life, and you only find it where you see an oil, where you see a protein, where you see a carbohydrate, and when you see nucleic acids, life has been there. Only life tends to do these kinds of things, okay? So it uses this electromagnetic characteristics of this thing in order to create a border around itself. It is fighting against disintegration, fighting against entropy. It is usurping, consuming resources, power to increase and dominate, okay? We are beginning to see the beginnings of this metaphysical construct that says that life is the will to power, right? This increase in domination that we're talking about is about growth, reproduction, competition. Growth, reproduction, competition, right? And on and on and on. And Black Curls evolves. Black Curls becomes, a multicellular organism in the ocean somewhere. It's still doing growth, reproduction, competition. It's still using the fundamental laws of the world, right? The metaphysical will of the world to develop eyes to see, okay? Very simple beginning kind of forms of eyes, like a pinhole camera type stuff to kind of filter light through and kind of see shadows and so on and so forth. It is using the same laws of electromagnetism and the electromagnetic spectrum, lights, filter, this, that, and the other, in order to gain power to do its will. The will to power, again, right? And we just did some simple definitions is what we've just done. We talk about the will, and we said that the will is the basic will, the forces of nature. We talk about power, simple, the capacity to do work, the rate at which you can do work, okay? Work is about moving things towards ends, moving forces, and so on and so forth. Forces, objects, that kind of a thing, right? And then we talked about Black Curls, our little single cellular organism out here, and what is it doing? It's using this metaphysical will, the laws of nature, in order to get power to fight against entropy, to consume resources around it, to do its bidding so that it can grow, reproduce, compete. Can I get a one in the chat if this is what life does? In other words, we cannot necessarily say what life is, but this is definitely what it does. It literally uses this fundamental will to direct a new kind of will, which we call life, but it's just an arrangement of these fundamental wills: electromagnetism, it uses gravity, it uses all these other things, rigidity, blah, blah, blah. The laws of physics it uses in order to get to its particular ends, right? Shout out for the super chat. I see ones in the chat as well. Yes, organic chemistry, organic biology. There's some people who can check me if I'm wrong, because I'm more of a physics guy. But I doubt I'm wrong. I did not know I was getting an organic biology class tonight. Keep it up, Ike. John, thank you very much. Let me go ahead and put your super chat up. Let me go ahead and do that. Why don't I? Why don't I? Yes. So we have done some fundamental defining of things. So now let's take it one step up. Black curls has evolved. Okay, black curls are a little guy that came out of the primordial ooze using the metaphysical priors which it has, which we call the laws of nature, which we call will. Okay, we're calling it will because we can understand will. Okay, rather than just think of gravity as a law, we say gravity is the will that pulls this glass down to the center of the earth. It's the will that pulls you down to your chair. And I think that's a great analogy, a great metaphor, because it helps us to get a glimpse into the world as it is from the inside, as opposed to the world as it simply represents itself to us. Now, black curls has evolved. Now, rather than just simple osmosis, diffusion, and the basic chemical characteristics of organic compounds, it now has things that are drives and instincts. Okay, it's got something called drives and instincts. Okay, it's not a little fish swimming in the ocean. It's got instincts and it's got drives. Okay, and I meant to say is a more complex organism. Or should I say no? In more complex organisms, I'm getting ahead of myself over here. In more complex organisms, I typically just assume I made an error. The will is more complex, right? The will is more complex. It is not just a simple semi-permeable membrane using lipids, diffusion, osmosis, so on and so forth, in order to create this arrangement that's fighting against entropy, so on and so forth. It has become more complex now. It has drives now. What are drives? As you can imagine, drives didn't come, when black curls, our single cellular friend, evolved now into this small fish. He did not borrow something from some other universe. It's still using the fundamental metaphysical will, to the laws of nature, right? Using the fundamental metaphysical will in order to create a more elaborate will now, which we can call drives and instincts. Okay, the laws of nature, which are the will, are built up into an elaborate scheme called drives and instincts. Hopefully that's clear, right? It's clear enough, simple enough. And again, remember, we're building up the metaphysics because where we tend to go with philosophy is we are looking for how we ought to live. Now, each part of philosophy is interesting, but when you talk about being actionable, it's the ethics and the politics, how we live, what's the good society, what's the good person. That's really when you start getting actionable. But you need to build up your metaphysical priors because it follows to the degree to which your philosophy is systematic. Then these things need to have some relationship to each other, right? So life being the will to power, starts from a metaphysical basis. We talked about the will and we talk about power, that is what life does. Okay? The drive to consume, the drive to procreate, the survival instinct. These things are all just more elaborate constructions of the fundamental will, the metaphysical will of gravity, electromagnetism, strong force, weak force, becomes complex organic chemistry, and so on and so forth. Eyes are opening and closing, black girls are swimming around, killing other fish, spreading his seed. You know, just generally doing what black girls does. Doing what black girls does. Indeed, 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 ladies and gentlemen. So, having said all that, we're now seeing that all this elaborate scheming and so on and so forth, it's still just a manifestation of the fundamental will, and then life being about, hey, I need this will to power my ends, right? I'm going to harness the gravity and the this and the that. Again, it's a metaphysical proposition. It's not just saying, it says that it comes out from the very root of being in itself, right? That the nature of things in and of themselves leads to this thing called life, which is using these natural laws for power. And you cannot separate the two. That this is a fundamental metaphysical proposition, not just some kind of surface level analysis of what we are doing here. We being living things. That this will to power thing goes all the way down. So goes Nietzsche, right? Or so says Nietzsche, right? And there's instincts, which are a little different from drives. Instincts are a little more. Can I get a one in the chat if we understand intuitively the difference between instincts and drives? Okay, drives just kind of push you blindly. Instincts are a little bit more, they're coy, they're subtle. You know, there could be an instinct to be an individual, for example, like young Swift. And then there's an instinct to be a herd animal, also like young Swift. But he likes to put the one about being an individual over the herd animal one. Okay, if he did not have the herd animal instinct, he would not be around today. We all have these different instincts. Okay, you cannot be completely socially inept. In other words, these are instincts. They're a little different from drives. Drives are kind of lower down there on the Maslow's hierarchy. You need to breathe. A drive to breathe, drink water, eat, reproduce. Okay, and then you have instincts for survival. Okay, instincts that help you survive. And we could call those the survival instincts. The herd mentality instincts, the instinct to individuate, if you will. Okay, but these are all just elaborate schemes using the same kind of deal. Same kind of deal. Did I miss a super chat? Bam! Sigma Jones, thanks for this learning stream. Really shows how powerful the mind can be. Sigma Jones. Thank you. Let me go ahead and place your super chat on the board. Thank you, thank you, thank you. So, moving right along towards our goal into seeing, okay, the kinds of things that Friedrich Nietzsche did with this idea. Okay, the soul now, okay, your core being, that which can or cannot be corrupted, that which has values, the holder of values, that which holds a story. One of the streams we did, we talked about the ego, and we talked about the ego really being a container, okay? A container that holds stories. You cannot get rid of the container, but you can check the superfluities in the container. You can check the extra stuff, the junk, and remove it so that you are not encumbered, so you can become unencumbered by the junk, right? But basically, you could call the subject, the soul, the ego even, right? That which you kind of are. You can talk about that as being not single and indivisible. Okay, it's not some kind of, oh, the soul. Because remember, Black Curls, when he started as a single cell organism out there in the primordial ooze of the ocean of Alpha Centauri, some planet out there, he already had multiple things that he was using. He had the electromagnetic properties of the cell membrane. He had the whole thing about the osmosis and the diffusion. He had these different things going on. And then he evolved into a fish. And now he's got drives, right? He's got a drive to do this, a drive to do that. He becomes a whale now, a mammal. So now he's got instincts that evolved over time. So the soul, and can I get a 1 in the chat now, if you see where this is going, you cannot say that the soul is this simple, singular, indivisible thing. No, it is not. It is not, ladies and gentlemen. Not by this construction anyways. Not by this construction. Viruses. Layla A. Let me go ahead. Thank you very much for the super chats, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for the super chats. Let me see. I think there are 2 over here. Shout out to you, Layla, for the $5. And then you put another $5 and you're asking about viruses. Viruses are nucleic acid code. In other words, it is rather interesting that you ask that question right now, right? When I start talking about, okay, that's Black Girl says viruses are like freeloaders. Yes, they are code. Correct me if I'm wrong, Black Girls, right? But they are code. So they got the nucleic acid part down, which is DNA and RNA. You know, ribonucleic acid or deoxyribonucleic acid, you know, the nucleic acids. And that's the code part of things. That's where the information gets stored. So it is interesting that you ask the question right now while we're talking about the fact that the soul is not something that is a simple unit. So if you can think of all these different aspects that make something, that makes life go, a virus, right, basically is the code part just simply left, okay? It says, I'm going to leave here and I'm going to go into different hosts. And I'm going to go into the host and mess around with their code. And it's almost like a spirit, right? They possess you. They are information. And let me get some kind of response, Layla, if we are addressing your question. GT. Are we addressing your question, Layla? Virus is a code. Virus is that information part. It simply has the information aspect of life, okay? And then, boom, it hijacks the host. It possesses it. It messes around with the code. Just like a computer virus, right? So, moving right along. I saw ones in the chat that suggest that you understand that the soul is not this simple one thing, your soul. It's like, no. Even in the Bible, it does say that, you know, we are legion. One particular quote from the New Testament, those whom know. Dr. Thunder, our resident Bible scholar, our resident theologian, when he comes back and watches the replay, he'll know what I'm talking about. But let me ask you guys, because we do meditation on this channel, right? We talk about master your subjective consciousness. I talk about feeling in the body. I talk about image in the head and talk in the head. Right now, if we were to stop, just pause and take a deep breath. And we close our eyes. We listen to the sounds of the ear. We feel the body. There is a community in there, is there not? Let me get a one in the chat. There is a community of images, a community of voices, a community of competing feelings. Some you can feel, some you cannot. Even if you've never meditated a day in your life, you can simply pause, take a deep breath, watch the feelings in your body, and then watch the image and the talk in your head. And you're immediately going to know that I'm not one person at all. Let me get a one in the chat if that is absolutely clear to you. You're not one person. I mean, by that what we're saying is the person is a community. It's not, you're not one person. Personhood, the soul is not this single, indivisible, unitary type deal. It, even in its manifestation as feeling, image, and talk, has all kinds of things that go on that are contradictory to each other even, right? But if we kept it at the simple level of drives, which is where we're coming from, okay? Drives, again, are these elaborate use of the fundamental metaphysical will, right? Which is just a use of the laws of nature in order to serve the ends of life. And we have these drives and we have these instincts, okay? Yes, young Swift, we all have split personality disorder. That's why people are so screwed up. Look, if the soul was unitary and pure and single, like, it's like there would be no issues whatsoever. It's like, I mean, the thing about these things is that they are obvious. When philosophy is good, it is obvious. It's right in your face, but you need to be able to kind of open up an eye. Sebastian Ritchie, hey, Red Sings of Blues. Good to see you back, he says. Shout out to you, Red Sings the Blues, and thank you very much for your $2. I need the dollar is all I need. Hey, I need a dollar is all I need. Hey, I need a dollar. It's all I need, and if I share with you my story, won't you share $10,000 with me? So, the soul is a complex interplay of, okay, and competition between drives and instincts, okay? You know what I mean? Because Black Curls is evolved now. When he was a simple, when he was our friend over here, this simple single cell organism, his soul was not too complex. His soul was kind of like, okay, it's like a thermostat almost. He has a thermostat function. He has a, do I let it in? Do I let it out? The cellular cell wall function, okay, osmosis, diffusion, maybe a little bit of energy production. After it evolved a little bit and it consumed mitochondria and incorporated mitochondria into its self, okay? And by the way, mitochondria is that thing that's in our cells, which is a foreign cell. We literally at some point consumed another cell and we now use it for our energy production, and that's called mitochondria. At some point, I just feel like, since I mentioned it, I have to take this tangent, sorry. But there was some point along the line where we consumed, and by we, I mean any particular organism that has, an animal cell, if you will, a eukaryotic cell. We consumed mitochondria. By that, I mean, like we literally engulfed this other cell, this other thing, and we use it as our means of energy production. So we have this other thing which has a DNA, and you may have heard of mitochondrial DNA. So there's another cell in our cell which we ate and we're using. So Black Curls started out small, started out simple. And then he took on mitochondria, got a little bit more complicated even. His soul is getting a little bit more complicated. By the time he gets to the point where he has now drives and instincts, okay, which again are just using of the laws of nature, okay, the fundamental will, the will of gravity, the will of electromagnetism, the will of the strong force and the weak force of the nucleus, using those wills in order to have power, okay? And now his soul is more complex. His soul is now a complex interplay of competition between drives and instincts. And we throw all that word salad in there. But if we just stopped again and check our souls right now, in other words, check the feelings in your body, maybe check the image in your head, the dreams that you're currently dreaming right now, a song in your head, a memory, a thing. It is manifold. It is complex. We're made up of a whole bunch of things. Complex interplay of drives and instincts, competing, and so on and so forth. Right? Indeed, indeed, indeed. Let me ask for another one in the chat if this view of the soul which we just gave, the view of the soul which is saying that the soul is a complex interplay and competition between and interplay between the various drives and the various instincts is clear, is self-evidently clear, that is. Not even clear conceptually or logically, but that we know this, we live this, we breathe this. This is who we are. This is whom you say you are, is always a complex interplay. Yes, we ate it. You are what you eat. Snuggles, is there something such as balanced mindset? If there is, can you tell me what it looks like? And how did the basis of this thought process come to form? We'll get there. Thank you very much, Snuggles, for the $5 super chat. The $5 super chat monarch. The monarch of the $5 super chats in the manosphere. Snuggles, him or herself. Let me see if I'm missing any other. Am I missing other super chats? I think I might be missing some thing or the other. No, not yet. No, not yet. Yes. And Snuggles, yes, we will get to the point where we can talk about the ethics. What do you do? How do you do it? How should you do it? Right? But it's all a direct through line from your metaphysics. Your metaphysics goes to your epistemology, which goes to your ethics, and your aesthetics, your politics, to the degree to which your philosophy is systematic. Now, we understand it is self-evidently clear, okay, that this soul of us, this person that we say we are, this subjective experience is not some kind of one thing, okay? As a matter of fact, you can literally blow out a certain part of your brain and completely lose a certain part of your soul. It's like gone now. Or you can have an accident and your personality completely changes, okay? Not so crazy if we look at how young, Black Girls, our little single-cellular organism, developed over time. Okay, so we know about the head versus the heart dichotomy, right? Can I get a one in the chat? We're going to give some examples, right? Because we're talking about this complex interplay and competition between drives and instincts. There's some, drive, which we call the head. You know, it is a complex of drives. It is not one single drive. It is not one single instinct. But we call it the head, right? It is in competition It has to interplay with something else we call the heart. It is not a thing, it's not like it's in your heart, but we call it the heart. Shorthand has to do with feelings. Okay, it's more felt, right? In our feeling, image, and talk trichotomy, which we use in this, I don't think trichotomy is a word, but hey, I'll use it. In our feeling, image, and talk trichotomy that we talk about in this channel, then the heart is more in your body, it's more in the feelings and so on and so forth, while the head is is in your head. Right? It'll be images and talk in your head. There's a visual component, there's a word component, there's a conceptual component. In other words, there's a language. There's a language to the head. The heart is your feels. Young Swift and his So we got the head versus the heart. How about this other one? We know about this one, right? We know about the little head versus the big head, right? We talk about that. This is just basically making it more self-evidently clear, even though we've seen it from our experience, that even in the language, even in our common understanding, that we have these ways of splitting up the soul. As I said, it's more like 1,000 different pieces, but we simply kind of just, we have these kind of big words like the heart, the big head, the little head. Okay, even the little head is a very complex, elaborate set of many different kinds of instincts and drives and so on and so forth. But we definitely know that one. Right? And we know, as I mentioned earlier, and this one may be something that is not readily talked about or commonly talked about, but there is an instinct to be a individual. There is also an instinct to be a herd animal. And young Swift is our resident herd animal hater. But as I mentioned earlier, young Swift, you have these two, you just order them in a certain way. You order them in a certain way. So, what is the through line here? Are we just throwing a whole bunch of stuff on the wall? No. We're saying, hey, Black Curls uses the fundamental will, which are the laws of nature, in order to get power. Okay? Whether he's a single cell organism, he has a drive to fight against entropy and disintegration, a drive to usurp the environment, consume, procreate, grow, expand in power. Okay? And as he becomes more and more elaborate, using the same laws of nature, he didn't go borrow some other laws from some other universe, he becomes more complex. Rather than just simple electromagnetism and so on and so forth, they become very complex. Now we call them like drives and instincts and so on and so forth. And even your entire soul is a complex manifold of these different drives and different instincts, but they're all coming down from this fundamental will to power. The will to expand your power, the will to discharge your power, to manifest your power, to manifest your ends in the world. Now, we continue. Okay? We continue. Okay? The drives and instincts, okay? The will or the soul serve life. And I haven't forgotten your question, Snuggles. That balanced mindset, so on and so forth, okay? Because we can kind of see. And the reason you asked the question is because I introduced the fact, which is self-evident to us, that there are all these competing factions in our soul. And you're asking, is there a balance? Well, let's see. We're talking about a particular kind of philosophy here, which is the philosophy of Friedrich Nietzsche. Okay? And we're going to see what he has to say about that kind of a thing. Okay? Not what everyone else has to say about that kind of a thing, but what he has to say about it. The drives and instincts serve power. Okay? Just another way of saying what I said before. Another way of saying what I said before, which is life is the will to power. We started out with black holes being a simple single cell organism doing its power thing. It doesn't stop just because it becomes a fish and becomes a whale and so on and so forth. It is still just doing a power thing, using the fundamental wills, orchestrated in a more elaborate way, but still the same will of the universe, right? Now, here is where we start getting into some interesting territory. Oh, it's all been interesting, don't get me wrong. Of course it's been interesting. We're talking, we're thinking. It is the easiest thing to do. One of my favorite quotes by Ayn Rand. Young Swift, what is the easiest thing to do in the world? The easiest thing to do in the world is think. According to Ayn Rand anyways, and I think it's true. It's very easy. Super easy. Thomas Anderson, The Will to Survive. Darwin, The Will to Power. Nietzsche, The Will to Meaning. Frank. Indeed. Damn, you're being called out, Young Swift. You said, Young Swift, this say you're part of the herd of Ike. I like to see you challenge that one, Young Swift. And yet Wallace is a little bit of a troll too. So just so you don't take it too personally, Young Swift, he's a bit of a troll. Indeed, thinking is the easiest thing to do. Thoughts are hardest to accomplish. But also, it's also hard for people to go against feelings. Okay? In other words, they're thinking, they're going down to a particular map on the road, and then there's a particular stop, particular turn they never make because it goes against their feelings. We call it delusion, right? We call it deflection, right? We all know, yeah, we're all here in this part of YouTube, you know, you can watch Kevin Samuel's show and see that process take place night after night after night. Where it's like, we're thinking, and then, I'm not going there, no, blah, 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 blah. Yeah, that is a problem. It is a problem with not understanding that, or it is, as a matter of fact, a manifestation of what we just said, which is that the soul is made up of competing drives and instincts. It's a complex interplay of these drives and instincts, okay? Thinking is the interrelationship between these drives and instincts. Can I get a 1 in the chat if what I just said makes sense? We've just talked about the drives and the instincts. Now, the interplay, the interaction, the moving of one against the other, that's what thinking is, according to this particular construct, right? It says that's thinking. Thinking is head versus heart, big head versus small head, right? It is nothing but that. Big head is doing something, small head is doing something, and then we say we're thinking, right? The heart once is doing something, the head is doing something, the stomach is doing something. They're fighting for what? Power. They're all serving life and they're all serving power. We experience it, so goes this particular framework, as thinking. The ability to be able to be fluid in your arrangement, manipulation of your, and that's why I always say, for me anyways, and this is mainly a man thing, because I'll get to the point now, and it's about the question of snuggles. And I've said this many other times what I'm going to allude to right now, but I'll explicitly state later, which is the ability to really cut through all emotional BS and get down to the core of thinking, regardless of where it takes you. In other words, thinking stoically is something that no man should be without. I'm just literally saying in a more ridiculous way what what Young Swift said earlier when he said, I hate dudes that go with their feelings. In other words, as a man, this is your lane. And I'm beginning to allude to the answer to your question, young Snuggles, about the balance, right? The balance. In other words, what I'm alluding to is there are different balances for different people. Okay? And this is not some wishy-washy relativist bullshit. You guys know I don't do that. This is a systematic elaboration of what we've talked about so far. There is a community in your soul. Okay? They're constantly vying for position. We experience this as thinking, but they're all serving life, and life is about power. They're all trying to be the most powerful, though, because they are will, after all. Gravity doesn't give a damn because we understand the metaphysical will, right? The metaphysical fundamental wills. Gravity, electromagnetism, the strong force, the weak force. They don't give a damn. They just want power. Gravity is going to continue to push down on this glass. It will never stop. Electromagnetism will continue to push up on the glass. It will never stop. Forever and ever, they will continue to fight. Do we get the picture? Can I get a 1 in the chat? This is the same thing going on in your soul. The big head will never stop fighting the little head. Just like gravity will never stop fighting electromagnetism, which is basically what you're seeing manifest itself in my palm right now. So, it serves power. Okay? Thinking is a means to an end. Okay? Well, and we even broke it down further. We said, hey, just like the soul is not some kind of independent thing, thinking is not independent at all. It is just the way like Einstein came through and said, hey, space and time are not independent. They're literally like part of this fabric called space-time. The main thing about relativity is a notion that things are not disconnected, even space and time. You cannot just say, oh, well, space is this thing, time is this thing. Einstein was so crazy that he was like, no, I don't think so. How can they be independent? How can two things not? It's like, no, they must be together somehow. They must affect each other such that you start traveling really, really fast and space warps. Time warps. In other words, they change. Go really fast, come back, more time has gone by. Go towards the event horizon of a black hole, time slows down, those kinds of things. Mass energy affects space, bending, space-time, that kind of a thing. Same thing we're saying here as well, which is your soul is not this single unitary thing. It is made up of a community of instincts and drives that are constantly fighting for power. Okay, and that thinking is not some kind of independent weird thing that just happened in and of itself, like a clock. Tick, 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 tick. That thinking, especially thinking about your life, especially thinking about ethics, morality. Aha, you see where it's going now? It is not about balancing your checkbook, not that kind of thinking. It is about the thinking that serves life. It's about the reason why you have the checkbook. It's about your goals for having that checkbook and so on and so forth. Not these subordinate type of thinking like, filling in numbers in some kind of a ledger. But that thinking, insofar as it is related to life, becomes highly interrelated. It becomes this war. It is literally the war of these different things fighting against each other. Okay? So, moral thought, how we ought to live. And the first time we introduced Friedrich Nietzsche is when we talked about master morality versus slave morality. And that's when we gave this kind of very simple working definition of morality, which is that morality is about values. Values are about ends worth pursuing and the virtues required for pursuing those ends. Okay? Can we agree on that working definition? Can I get a one? The working definition of morality. That morality is about the ends worth pursuing. Okay? What are the ends worth pursuing? What is the totem pole of things that are worth doing, things that are worth defending, things or the things you should not be doing? And okay, what are the virtues that one needs to cultivate in order to do these things, right? Oh, it is worth it to be a man of this. Well, what are the virtues required, right? That kind of a thing. So it is a means to an end where the end is life. So goes this construct, right? The end is life. And life is the will to power. Thinking, thinking is about power, as we already just talked about, which is just thinking is the interplay of these different drives fighting against each other. Big head fighting against little head fighting against heart, all this stuff. And we experience it as thinking. It manifests images and talk in the head because we have conceptual representation. We can write it down and so on and so forth. We can go back and forth. It is definitely also a social aspect. There's a social aspect to language and communication and thinking for sure, because there is a social aspect to life. No matter how much young Swift denies it. No matter how much young Swift denies it. He likes hanging out here, even though he denies it. So, life is the ultimate end, as I just said. Okay? Morality, ethics, philosophy serves life. We already said thinking serves life. The purest form, the most fundamental form of thinking is what we're doing right now, right? Philosophizing. The mistake that people tend to make is that they think that this thinking is all independent, it's its own little bubble, it is not about anything. No, it is the most, especially philosophy. Nietzsche is saying, look, if you're doing chemistry, you can say, oh, it's different. If you're balancing your checkbook, you can say, oh, okay, it's independent. But when you're doing philosophy, you are very much about life. And therefore, you are very much about the fighting of these individual drives. And it will all begin to make sense soon. It already makes sense, doesn't it? If everything we have stated earlier, if the premises which you've laid out are true, then this conclusion, semi-conclusion here, that philosophy serves life, is also true. Young Swift has been in denial. Denials and delusions. You're seeing the clashing of the different drives and the instincts. You got to be able to move fluidly between these. Again, no offense to any women out there, but especially if you're a man. And if you're a real woman, you would know why you should not be offended by that. It's like, because someone needs to take care of the babies. And there is something about the willingness to go all the way there with your thinking that is not amenable to taking care of babies. If we were all Stoics, if we were all Marcus Aurelius, that's men and women, that is, we might just decide, hey, you know what? I think young Swift is too slow. Let's just leave him behind. That one there, you know, I wanted, doesn't look like he's going to be too tall. Let's chop his head off. Right? Indeed, indeed, indeed. Young Swift to immature Swift. Yes, 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 yes. Philosophy is a means by which various drives and instincts try to gain ascendancy and power. Now, I know this whole slide here has been saying the same thing over and over again, but the final statement that I just made down there, I would like for a 1, please. All questions, denials from Young Swift, for example. That philosophy is the means, because we called it thinking before, okay, that it's just kind of fighting between drives and instincts and so on and so forth, which again are representations of the fundamental will being, electromagnetism, gravity, the world in of itself. That the world in and of itself is doing this life thing. It's doing this power thing. Philosophy, being a means to an end, being fundamental thinking, is a means by which drives and instincts try to gain ascendancy and power over each other. Little head trying to get power over big head. Heart trying to get power over head. And then they argue, and people write all kinds of long treatises and scrolls about, why this one is true and why that one is right, why this is more beautiful and this is more good. Nietzsche is saying it's just brain cells versus what are the forget the cells of those, the genetic material type cells are called something, right? It escapes me now. Now I feel like Young Swift from the last stream, he was trying to figure out. Young Swift, was it realism you were looking for when you were talking about the word that means, you face life as it is? Was it realism, realistic? Was that the word? Did you ever find the word? Now I'm curious. Now I am curious. I am curious. Did you ever find out what you were looking for? Thomas says, I agree, hence plurality of philosophies. Okay. So it goes. So it goes. Now we have to understand. Yeah, realist. I was going to say it, but. Or like, I saw the question too late. I was like, really? Realist? Yeah, I know how that must have sucked. But, germ cells. The germ cells are the cells that so it's a fight between brain cells and germ cells. So people write these big books about stuff, either favoring brain cells or favoring germ cells. And Nietzsche is saying, fundamentally, that's what's going on. That if you think it's some kind of otherworldly, like Plato. Plato, for example, on the one hand, you have Plato, and on the other hand, you have Nietzsche, right? Plato would say that there is a world of ideals, a world of forms, some kind of perfect geometric world of, perfect shapes and perfect ideas and the good in and of itself and blah, blah, blah. From where these ideas come down, and we need to be able to find our way up there. And Nietzsche is like, dude, it's just your dick arguing with your brain. It's just these things firing shots at each other, and one is gonna, depending on how you're constituted, one is gonna have ascendancy or primacy over others. Depending also how you're trained, you're gonna have a hierarchy. The point is, though, you must have a hierarchy. Even Plato ordered the soul into 3 parts: the desiring part, right? The part that desires, food, sex, that kind of stuff. And then the spirited part, that part that's kind of associated with, let's say, valor and those kinds of things, that warrior part, right? And then you have the brain part. And Mr. Plato says you put the brain on top. The brain is always on top. And he says it's because of all these things about the good, the true, the beautiful, and the blah, 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 blah. Nietzsche is like, Yes, the tripartite soul. Nietzsche said, nope. It's just nature just doing its thing. All the way from the fundamental rudimentary laws of nature. And then black curls became a single cellular organism using electromagnetism, osmosis, diffusion in order to do its power thing. And then it continues to evolve and evolve and evolve and now has drives and instincts. But it's just the same kind of thing going on. It has now many elaborate forms of drives and instincts. We call it a soul. And then the different drives and instincts are fighting against each other. We call it thinking. And there is no such thing as, oh, up there in the sky, it's no, it's just simple drives vying for power. Shout out to the Afi Kingdom podcast. Yes, black curls can devolve because it's just a question of there is no directionality. The directionality is what we put on it, right? If you define something as going backwards, then yes, there are ways in which he could go backwards, right? Maybe physically the human being is not as strong as it should be, so maybe we've devolved, right, compared to, a bear or something, right? So, of course, that does happen. So, again, we seem to be in agreement that philosophy is the means by which these different drives try to gain ascendancy and power, right? And here's the thing. Look, this was very revolutionary. Let me get a one in the chat if you understand how in the 18th century for someone to explicitly state this, because in the ancient world, let me say, in the ancient world, these things were kind of implicitly understood in the sense that, power, might is right, that kind of thing, but it was not explicitly stated. When people started philosophizing, Plato and so on and so forth, they had that, what Nietzsche calls dogmatic thinking, which there's some kind of truth, it's out there, and we're trying to reach for it. Let me get a one in the chat if you understand how revolutionary it is for this crazy guy called Nietzsche to say, hey, stop it. This is really what's going on here. It is this will to power thing which starts fundamentally from the fundamental aspects of universal will, right? Gravity, so on and so forth. Life then takes it, it orders it to do its own bidding. We evolve, we evolve, we evolve. These will things, which was gravity, electromagnetism, strong force, weak force, take on elaborate arrangements. We call them drives and instincts and so on and so forth. The relationship, interrelationship and interplay and competition between these drives and so on and so forth is thinking. So stop your bullshit about truth. And he's like, oh crap. Right? He said, because now we went from the metaphysics, we're passing through the epistemology now, which is how you know what you know, and we're touching on the ethics, saying your bullshit about the truth, the true, the good, and the beautiful, the platonic ideals, that stuff up there, it's bullshit. And that is quite, even up till today, it is still quite revolutionary. And we also know the famous line, God is dead, that Nietzsche said. And by the way, it wasn't Nietzsche that was pronouncing God dead. He was just stating it, and he was pointing out a fact that how it was going to be devastating to our souls. We did not understand because we, the scientific revolutionaries or whatever, were thinking, oh, we're killing God and we're going for truth. We did not understand that the world is a little weirder than that. So if there are any super anti-religious people out there, you need to kind of think again. You need to think more fundamentally about what you are and what the human condition is before you think that things are just black and white. Perhaps we need God. Okay? And who are you to say we don't, right? And God is different for different people, depending on what level you are at, your manifestation. You know, we all know Jordan Peterson, right? They asked Jordan Peterson, "Do you believe in God?" And he's like, "Well, it depends on what you mean." Well, you know, did Jesus die on the cross? Well, it depends on what you mean by die, right? You have those kinds of people, the Jordan Peterson types, whom, yes, I'm going to show my cards. I'm more of a Jordan Peterson type. You ask me that kind of a question, I'm going to tell you, what do you mean by that? Because I know what I mean by God, and so on and so forth. And unless I think that we can have that conversation, I'm not interested in either deceiving you or wasting my time, right? I know what I mean by God. Unless I think that we can both come to a certain level where we're having the same conversation using the same words, I'm not interested in either deceiving you or wasting my time talking about God with you, because it's just again, words are borders around concept. God is literally the biggest border one, and people are stupid, right? That's one thing that Young Swift can agree with. Hey, let me get a 1 in the chat, Young Swift, if you can agree that people are stupid. Hence, you can't just go talking about God with people. Again, it's my type of person, okay? Some people are comfortable talking to stupid people about stuff. I don't like to talk to stupid people about the biggest concept there is, right? Like, the biggest concept there is, I'm just going to be talking to some idiot in the street about it? No, sorry. But everyone needs to reconsider the thinking that, oh, God was killed in the favor of truth. Do you really know what truth is? Especially if you're given this kind of thinking, which you guys have been agreeing to and saying 1, 2, and so on and so forth. This is a big challenge to the way people used to think, right? God is dead, and we have killed him. How shall we comfort ourselves? The murderers of all murderers. Exactly. We thought that it was just going to be something that we can get away with. Oh, we just go ahead and we kill him and nothing will happen. Yes, so Snuggles. Yeah, Snuggles is always asking questions like this. What makes someone stupid? I don't like to talk about that either. The inability to come this far in the conversation without dropping off and start talking about Game of Thrones. Well, I mean, Game of Thrones is a little bit advanced. The inability, unwillingness to even come this far in such a conversation, which is even the surface elaboration on a simple topic like this, that would be stupid. One manifestation of stupid, Snuggles, right? The unwillingness also to break through emotional barriers in order to see the true interrelationship, the inability to look within correctly, that will be another manifestation of stupid. The inability to deal with the world as it is, as opposed to dealing with it as you think it should be, that is another manifestation of stupid. I can go on and on and on and on and on about all the different manifestations of stupid, which I don't like to deal with, okay, which you already know, but you like asking questions like that. Now, I asked if we're still in the chat because we're talking now about that balance. The balance in the life, the ethical aspect, the political aspect. How then should we live? If all this is true, if all we just said is true, and I think it is, that's why Nietzsche is one of my favorite philosophers. I think that his challenges are true. Now it is up to us to rearrange certain things about our thinking. If all of this is true, where's the balance, right? If this is all just big head fighting against small head, heart fighting against brain and body and soul, the spirit and the flesh, and if the soul is really a community of these different drives and instincts vying for power, if thinking and philosophizing really is just a way of these different drives to order themselves, something that even Plato would agree to, then how the hell are we what's the good life? What is good? What is true? What is beautiful? How do we know? a herd of cats. So on the left side, we have my namesake, King David. And I'm going to say again, the first time we introduced Friedrich Nietzsche was when we talked about master morality and slave morality. Anyone watch that stream? I think Young Swift probably watched that stream. Was there anyone that remembers the stream on master morality and slave morality? That's the first time that we introduced Friedrich Nietzsche, and another one of his devastatingly insightful ideas. Because the whole thing that he was showing there is, hey, look at the Old Testament. Look at the paragon of morality in the Old Testament. Look at what they were preaching in the Old Testament. Okay? It was about the milk and honey, reward right here on earth. It was about go and slay the Philistines, every man, woman, and child, kill them all, take the land, right? David, an example of a righteous man, was a man of conquest, a man of war, a man of action, a man of domination of the external world. It was about the external world. Your results, your rewards are here on earth. Jehovah will show you a land over there, not a land in heaven, a land right there. You go take that land, right? And then Nietzsche said, look at what was said there when they were on top. When they were on top, they said this. And then when they were under the boots of the Romans, they say something quite different. See, now the Romans are bad, right? What's so different between Caesar and King David? What's so different between Caesar and King David? Wasn't Caesar just going to take the land that God, right? But they flipped it, and it was, okay, no, it's about spiritualizing now. It's about what's internal, okay? It's about God in your heart, and it's not about the law, and it's about blessed are the meek. And then we resolve those two things by saying, look, King David was about mastering the external environment, and this other, what is called slave morality, is about mastering the internal environment, and you actually need both. Hey, you see, that's how they come together. That's how they come together. First, you need to get the sword, master the sword, and then you need to sheath the sword and turn the other cheek. You can turn the other cheek when you actually have power, because you know those blows don't mean nothing to you. That's what it means. Once you're able to conquer the world, conquer the external environment, protect and provide, then you don't worry about people slapping you across the face. Does that make sense? Let me get a 1 in the chat if that makes sense. King David, conquering of the external environment, a man of war, a man of conquest, a man of concubines, so on and so forth, establishing the land, using the sword. But then what? You still also got to sheath the sword and be able to turn the other cheek. Okay? Mastering yourself from the internal side. And you need both. That's the dichotomy. And Nietzsche also presented this very well. That's why Nietzsche is one of my favorite philosophers. And the way he does it, he just does it in nice, he just says it. In other words, he doesn't do this argumentation thing where it's like, you are the premises and blah, 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 and this and that. And the other. Like, he just says, look, hey, look. This is how it is. It's big head versus small head. Hey, look, master morality versus slave morality. Hey, look, he says it, and says it in a very beautiful way. He's one of the smartest guys ever. And also one of the best writers. It's hard to find that combination in the same person, right? So, now that we've gotten to the point where we're saying, okay, what is philosophy then? You see, Thomas has already agreed that, yes, there are multiple philosophies. And these multiple philosophies are a result of these different drives vying for power. Life is the will to power. Every drive has philosophized, is what Nietzsche said. He said, every drive is philosophized. What does that mean? It means your stomach has philosophized before. He says, penises philosophize, stomachs philosophize, hearts philosophize, brain cells philosophize. Every instinct, drive, whatever it is, they all philosophize. Because this thinking is a means to an end of power. Right? And they are all this community of drives and instincts and so on and so forth, constantly vying for power. Okay? They all philosophize. So now we're going to take it down to the level of looking at the different types of people, which are a question of the arrangement of these drives in the people. Because we all have these drives. Yes, Even young Swift has a herd instinct. He just arranges it maybe down at the bottom. Right? But it's there. Okay. So, King David, what is he? Because we're going to compare King David with a saint. The saint is more of the other guy. But let's elaborate on King David first, okay? King David is a warrior prince. He's out there cutting off Goliath's head. He's out there fighting the Philistines. He's out there vying for power against King Saul. He is doing things in the real world, literally killing people, okay? Killing people, marrying those wives, man of conquest, a man of action, a man of mastery of the external world, right? Old Testament type dude, right? The point of bringing up King David here is because this character here has a code of ethics. There is a moral code about how to be a King David. Can I get a 1 in the chat if you get that? It is not just, oh, it's just one type of person. It's like, no, there is a whole morality to it, a whole philosophy to it, a whole kind of, this is a righteous man. This we uphold as a good person. We know it's very different from the saint person, which we'll talk about next. But there is a whole philosophy. Can I get a 1 in the chat? A whole philosophy about this type of person. What does that philosophy entail? This kind of philosophy puts the brain and the sword at the top. In other words, cold calculation, competition, mastery of the external world by force, the sword, force, right? And then you put the stomach and all that other stuff below. Yes, I'm not going to let the little head or the stomach get in the way of me being a cold, calculated sword slinger. And the heart is somewhere down there. Yeah, David liked to write songs too. He liked to dance too. But after the killing is done, you know what I'm saying? After the killing is done, then maybe I'll take your wife and have some fun. That's how he rolled. That's how this particular type of archetype rolls. Is there a philosophy that talks about this thing in many, many, many different words and so on and so forth? Well, you heard of Marcus Aurelius? Have you heard of Stoicism? Have you heard of Stoicism? Snuggles. Can you answer me this? Are you beginning to see the answer to the question that you asked about balance earlier? In other words, would you tell a typical average woman to be a King David? Is Stoicism, this particular ordering, okay, where you put the sword and the head on top, you put the heart in the bottom, and you have a whole philosophical system about how that works? Would you tell a woman would you say, oh, well, that's, this is for everybody? In other words, is it for everybody? The point is, where is the balance? The balance is there are many different balances. And you're trolling me if you say, yes, you're going to tell the woman to be King David, because that's the human race will literally end. Human race would literally end. The rank ordering is what is needed. The rank ordering is what is needed. The rank ordering is what you must do. But how you rank order it is going to be different. And as a matter of fact, as you may already suspect, You don't have much choice. I know that look, I didn't go somewhere and think through my whole thing and be like, you know what, I think I'm a stoic type of person, or or no, that it's kind of I have reasoned to the point where I'm going to choose stoicism. It's like, no, I'm just a cold-hearted bastard. That just comes with the territory. I could not be anything other than that, right? And then my autobiography, like a Marcus Aurelius type, would just be stoicism. He's just talking about himself. And other people who find themselves to have that kind of similar arrangement of soul can go read Marcus Aurelius. But they were already cold-hearted bastards before they found the book. They were already cold-hearted bastards before they found the book. I am saying that telling a woman to become a warrior prince, chopping off heads and just, putting that on top, and by a woman, what I mean is obviously, and I hate that I have to say this kind of statistical thing all the time, but we're not talking about the most masculine woman you ever saw, right? Oh, but what about this one masculine woman over there in New Mexico? I once met this one. It's like, come on, we're adults over here. We know we're talking about generalities, right? We're talking about generalities, and when we say woman and we say femininity, we're talking about the middle of the bell curve, not some kind of extreme. Of course, you're going to have the extremes. However, Mr. King David, the works of Marcus Aurelius really are about this particular arrangement of drives and instincts. They're just doing this particular dance. That's what they're doing. Therefore, what does it mean to talk about truth with a capital T, especially when it comes to ethical philosophy? Because remember, we have this guy over here on the right. And remember, okay, when I mentioned earlier the heart and the brain, the little head, I said, look, the heart, you can break down the heart into perhaps 10, perhaps 20 different aspects. In other words, it's more complex, the arrangement. The configurations are so numerous, right? But the main point is you need to have an ordering, most of which you don't have any say in. You already are how you are. However, being able to identify consciously the ordering and being able to emulate the other people, let's say Marcus Aurelius, if you're a Stoic type, that have done it very well, or like the Buddha type, who does a lot of mastery of subjective consciousness type stuff, then that is the game. It is not a game of finding some truth out there. Again, so goes this philosophy. Because one could also say, well, that Nietzsche's philosophy is also influenced by Nietzsche's own particular idiosyncrasies. And he would not deny that, right? He actually says it too. Whenever someone is saying, hey, these things are influencing you, they should also be open to, well, isn't the fact that you're saying this thing also influenced by the things that influence you? You know, that kind of a recursion. Patriarchy. Point being what? What is the point? The point being, in philosophy, there is no room for political correctness, or bullshit, inability to think, none of that. Like all those kinds of things are already kind of implied. That these are ideas, and if you have emotional hang-ups, fine. You're not a philosophical thinker. And not everybody has to be that, right? But kind of blocking and be like, oh, remember I said it earlier, there's this road down here in this particular set of ideas, I don't want to go there. Well, Yeah. And even I was saying earlier that it's not for everybody. There are different arrangements of soul that should not do the Stoic thing, for example. So the saint, what is the saint doing? Okay? The sage, a man of peace, total opposite of David. Okay? Total opposite of David, but still a paragon of morality. And perhaps even, especially in the modern times, a more apt, a more recent, a more, shall I say, relatable paragon of morality. We no longer, we're kind of scared of the King David types these days, right? Even though they're still there and they got to be there, you know, the Mad Dog Maddises of the world, the General Pattons of this world. Yeah, we still have to secure the lower parts of Maslow's hierarchy. Someone still needs to secure the borders. The world is still a dangerous place. It'll never change. As a matter of fact, you know, nature is nature, right? It doesn't go away. It doesn't hide because you get clean water in your house and your mail gets delivered to you. Doesn't mean that in order for that to happen, some killing isn't going on. Like that's just it's a given. To be aware of it is important. If you think that nature has run away and hidden somewhere, no, it's just been outsourced to people out there dropping bombs, killing people, securing the borders, you know, betrayals and this and that. All that stuff forever will continue to go on even if you don't see it, right? So a more relatable paragon of morality these days is the slave morality, the New Testament morality, the mastery of the internal, which, by the way, to the point again, Snuggles, I mentioned balance, right? I mentioned balance and I said that the master morality and the slave morality need to come together, right? That's another kind of balance. That is another kind of balance. The heart and the head. Okay? The heart. This is someone whom would say, no, you can't just go there and kill every man, woman, and child of the Philistines. You see, the reason why Jehovah said kill every man, woman, and child is because Jehovah knows that, hey, if you let some of them survive, 2 generations down, they're going to come back and then they're going to kill all of you. Can I get a 1 in the chat? If that makes sense. You see, when you have brain and sword on top of the hierarchy, you're like, hey, I know the heart is like, oh, but you can't kill all of them. But brain and sword says, hey, if I don't kill every man, woman, and child in that land of Canaan or wherever I'm going that God said I'm going to take, if I don't kill all the livestock and completely raise the thing down to the ground, few generations from now, they're going to come back and I'm going to be the one getting killed. My grandchildren are going to get killed in front of my eyes. Okay? That's the head and the sword on top type of thinking. That's what Jehovah was saying in the Old Testament. Is it wrong? Is it wrong is the question. But you see, and that's why I like Nietzsche, if you're asking if it's wrong, you've missed the point. I'm sorry for asking for so many ones, but can I get another one if you see what I just said? If you're asking, oh, but is the saint right and is Jehovah wrong for saying, you've missed the point. You've missed the point here. Nature doesn't work that way. The gravity will continue to push down. The electromagnetism will continue to push up. Who is right and who is wrong? Between electromagnetism holding the glass up and gravity pushing the glass down, who is right and who is wrong? Nietzsche says that's an error to ask that kind of question. And it at least, even if you don't agree with Nietzsche, you have to challenge that. You have to come up with a, how do I decide who is right and who is wrong? And then you have to at least then do some digging and so on and so forth. The Bible does a masterful work of bringing the King David and the New Testament together. And says, hey, you need to be able to wield that sword. And then afterwards, you need to sheathe it. And as a matter of fact, it's not a one and then you do the other. These things, they happen simultaneously. You need, speak softly, carry a big stick. It's that kind of a imagery. You need to have power over the external world, mastery over the external world, and at the same time, mastery of yourself, mastery of the internal world. That's the resolution that the Bible tries to do. Okay? At least how I'm saying it. Not that, stupid people get it, I just said that to please young Swift because, he needs to bash the herd every now and again, otherwise he's unsettled. He needs to bash the herd. Beyond Good and Evil. Yes, I'll be doing an expose on Beyond Good and Evil specifically, which is one of the books in which his assault on traditional morality, which is what I'm elaborating right now. I'm elaborating on Nietzsche's assault on traditional morality, okay? Coming via the route of will to power to this point, which is not necessarily, they're all related because I think they're related, that, the will to power gets you to this point where you're like, oh, philosophy serves life. Life is about power, okay? This thing is about the arrangement of the soul and so on and so forth. Who's right, who's wrong is a category error. You've made a mistake. You lost the way somewhere if you're asking that question. In other words, that's why the name of the book is called Beyond Good and Evil. Like, you got to move beyond that point. Part of the consequence of us killing God. So what is the, as I said, you have this particular man on the left. He does this particular kind of thing. He puts brain and sword on top, blah, blah, blah. Okay? What is the philosophy of brain and sword? It's called Stoicism. It's just these drives. When these drives rise to ascendancy, these are the things they say. That's what Nietzsche would say. Other people would say, oh, it's truth and the right and the good and the this and the that. Put in a whole bunch of words together to try to tell you why this particular way of being is good. Nietzsche is just saying, hey, it's just brain and sword. It's not right, it's not wrong. It does what it does. It has its own purposes. It has its own power. Again, just like gravity and electromagnetism, they do what they do. And when over here on this other end, it's called asceticism, ascetic philosophy, the philosophy of when you think asceticism, think Buddhist monk, okay? Lifestyle of renunciation, withdrawal into the inside, mastery of self, it has brain and heart at the very top. Everything else is below. It's brain and heart, okay? Brain and heart. So, let's wrap this up by comparing our friend on the left, okay, our friend on the left, King David, with another individual. Let me see. 816. I thought I did a good job of keeping this one short, but this one was a rather elaborate one, so I'm actually not doing so bad. We're over 2 hours, but not doing so bad. Not doing so bad with regards to time. Dude on the right, weird. Shekels. Yes, Layla. The conclusion that you're drawing is an apt one, but it is more of a understanding of the landscape of, I would put words into Nietzsche's mouth and I would say this. Okay? It is not that there is no good or right. It's that those words don't really have meaning, especially in a landscape where you've killed God. You need to have a top-down system, okay, where you build a metaphysical construct and you infuse it with a metaphysical construct that infuses a mythology that is instantiated in the people, in the tribe, and so on and so forth. And then you can talk about good, right, and so on and so forth. But once you let the horse out of the barn, and Layla, let me know if I'm making sense. Once you've like, oh, I'm gonna take off the blindfolds, and you cannot talk about right or wrong anymore. Now it's too late. Now you see what's going on. Now you see it's just arrangement of these different drives of soul and so on and so forth. That now you know that your job is to go and forge your soul, find out what the arrangement of your soul is, and then live in accordance with that type. But if you don't have a top-down system that locks down the whole tribe from God and its metaphysics, infusing the metaphysics into mythology, having systems of power and rights and culture and so on and so forth that instantiates that thing, then you can't talk about the right and the wrong anymore. So let me know if that makes sense, Layla. Now, going to the guy on the right. This is a merchant, okay? And we also talked about, when I did a stream, slowly introducing these ideas. The first time, before I did the stream on master morality and slave morality, I talked about, hey. When Kevin Samuels talks about high value men, he's talking about a particular hierarchy. Do you guys remember that one? I said, there is a merchant hierarchy, there is a sage hierarchy, there is a warrior hierarchy, okay? And that these things don't mix. So if a high value man in a capitalist society, okay, using capitalist rubric where you can measure what high value is, okay, money for a certain amount of time, blah, blah, blah. And we said the ends worth pursuing and the virtues required for the pursuit of these ends. People tend to forget about the virtues. People say, oh, how about, well, that doesn't make you valuable. How about my sage? I'm a saint. It's like nobody gives a crap about your saintliness. We're talking about merchant class hierarchy, you idiot. No, I'm alpha. I'm a warrior. Like, yeah, sure. Go somewhere else with that bullshit. You clearly can't think straight. These things have nothing to do with each other. All right? Warriors don't go start arguing with merchants about who's more, whatever. They're doing totally different things. And if you really were a sage or so on and so forth, well, then go be a monk in a monastery somewhere. Or you can do the other kind of thing. Be a philosopher, be a nuclear physicist, split the atom. Do that stuff. Don't be telling us about, you can't say high value money. Like, it's so stupid. Yeah. So now you guys know how I feel about stupid. It literally irritates me. It makes my skin crawl when people just they don't know how ridiculous they look because it exposes a certain insecurity about them. Who gives a crap what you're talking about? Why do you have to? Who asked for your stupid opinion? Obviously, this is a particular hierarchy, which is not something crazy to be saying in modern day liberal democracy capitalistic society. What's wrong with you? Again, it's like the people who talk about happiness when you talk about money. That's another set of ridiculous stupidness, which, and by the way, the reason why I get this way, especially in this YouTube channel, is because I don't want those kinds of people here. You know what I mean? this is not about, oh, I want, well, let's continue to swell the ranks. Like, no, I don't want, I want it to be absolutely clear the type of nonsense we don't tolerate over here. I don't want those people around. They're not going to get anything from this. And I don't want them around. They irritate me. So, this kind of a person prefers peace, okay? Unless, of course, he's part of the military-industrial complex, and that's until recently where war became profitable. But generally speaking, in terms of the general, okay, peace is more amenable to trade, okay? Remember, we're talking about philosophies here. Thomas already agreed. There are many philosophies. Our sequence of thoughts led to the statement that philosophies are a means by which different drives, these different wills, these different parts of your soul, drives and instincts, try to gain ascendancy, okay? And that all these drives are philosophized. And we describe a man, we describe a type, we talked about big head, little head, and all that kind of stuff, and we describe the arrangement of the drives, and then we point to the philosophy where you can go find the big books that talk about all these things. They don't necessarily talk about it this way. They talk about it in terms of it being true. But you can look at it this way and you can say, yes, it's true if you're King David and you're doing King David stuff. In other words, life is not so simple, unfortunately, especially after you've killed God. Things have consequences. So, this guy likes peace, okay? What is this? This is the stomach. Can I get a 1 in the chat if we understand that the merchant puts the stomach on top? He's saying, hey, whatever it is that allows me to trade, allows me to feed my stomach. In other words, if you're using the tripartite soul, the 3 different parts of the soul, he puts the desire, it's the desirous part that's on top for him. It's like what we may call materialism these days, right? Is there a philosophy? Can we guess what's the name of the philosophy? What's the name of the philosophy? What's some words that come to mind when the stomach wins the argument? When the stomach wins the argument, what is the name of that philosophy? What words come to mind? Before I give you my thoughts on what it's called. And it's all around us today. It's not like anything we have to, think about. Yeah, gluttony is a sin, but I'm talking about a legitimate philosophy, right? Because the whole thing is, you have all these different drives and so on and so forth, and they have a nice pure form with, thinking. They use thinking because thinking is a means to an end. Thinking is just a way for them to get power. Which thinking does the stomach use to get power? What do we call it today? It is so around you that you've forgotten what it is. Also, let me add one more thing. This guy has a herd mentality. Okay? In other words, it's more like whatever is best for keeping the, we don't want to, because King David is like, screw the herd. We got to do what we got to do. This is Sparta. Kick him into the well. We blah, whatever, that kind of thing. Okay? How about capitalism? How about freedom? How about utilitarianism? How about liberal democracy? That's all stomach. Right now we live in the era of the stomach. Layla got it. We live in the era of the stomach. It's all around us, and that's why we don't even notice it. Someone might then ask, is it wrong? And I will say again, according to the rubric of this, because when I do these kinds of streams, I try to stick with the tenets of the philosophy that I'm talking about, right? So I'm not going to hop far off to answer questions that are outside of the tenets. So if you ask, well, is capitalism wrong? It's like, well, Nietzsche is like, dude, the stomach is ruling. Don't ask questions about it. That's all it is. Well, is brain better than stomach? And how about this particular arrangement here? How about if I put brain and sword? How about if I put heart in this? And how about I put this and that? You know, it's like you can say all that stuff, but you've killed God, and now you cannot talk about what's right or wrong anymore. It's just these different arrangements. Right now, we're in the stomach era. Okay? So Wallace says, why isn't it right? It's like, yeah, that's a decent question. But the tenets of Nietzsche would say that is a wrong question to be asking. You should just take that whole notion of is it right out of your head. In other words, you, me, or you as a person could say, I am not down for that. I am going to go and be a King David. In other words, to answer the question for Snuggles, again, what is the balance? You have to find the balance for yourself. In other words, philosophy is psychology now. Know thyself from the ancient times is really now what does this come back to? And only you can say that capitalism is wrong because you have a particular arrangement of soul and you better go fortify it and be the best version of that. Because there are many things, because I am more of the Stoic. If you have different hierarchies, because there are many different kinds of hierarchies, but if you use the hierarchy that I used that time, I put the sage on top, okay? Because of the brain aspect of things. Cold calculating, whatever. Money is down there below because money is needed in order to do my art and my philosophy. That's why money is very important. The means to an end. I like to be free, that kind of a thing. But the point is this. It is now up to you to understand yourself so well that you might have the chance of ordering your own soul by yourself. The reason why Nietzsche lamented the death of God is because he understands how almost impossible this is, especially for the masses. Can I get a one in the chat if it is clear that what he meant by, look, I mentioned before, stupid people and so on and so forth. Like, first of all, the people that would listen to this or the people that do this kind of stuff or the people that would even think that this is relevant at all, very few. And then the people that have a certain kind of fortitude to go deeper and say, I'm going to forge my soul, I'm going to master my subjective consciousness, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, even fewer. Hence, the lamentation of the death of God, because God was that which, from the very top, kept the whole tribe singing from the same hymn book, if you will. You disaggregate and remove things, now each individual has to form their own God. You're never going to get that critical mass. That being the point. That is the whole point. So, ladies and gentlemen, Nietzsche said he philosophizes with a hammer. And quite appropriately, he does not hold back punches. And neither do I when talking about Nietzsche. And it may make sense to you why I find him to be one of my favorite types, or my favorite philosophers and writers. It is not easy, or a lot of people don't find him easy to understand. So I don't, but I do encourage everyone to check out some more of his stuff. Read Beyond Good and Evil. To the degree to which you give a damn about any of this kind of crap anyways. But life is more complex than you think it is. Stuff's more messed up than you think it is. Things are not in nice little neat categories. Exactly. The sage is the warrior of thoughts. And that is why I don't like bullshit. That is why I can't stand the deflecting, obfuscating, but yo, you can't say that, you can't go there. I'm just like, please don't come to my channel. Please stay very far away from me. I don't, it's such a waste of time. And I don't expect it to sound good. I don't expect for everyone to be like this. Of course not. But I do what I want to do. So, ladies and gentlemen, let's do a quick recap of this, okay? I try my best to keep this simple because it is not a simple concept, okay? To talk about life being the will to power. But I think the main thing is that the soul is a complex interplay of these competing drives and instincts, okay? And these drives and instincts are serving life, and life is about power. We don't need to go about Black Curls and how he came to being and so on and so forth again. But we understand that. The main other thing is that philosophy now, which every drive is philosophized, because people think, oh, it's about truth and the good and the beautiful. Again, I'm staying within the tenets of this particular thing. Okay, so if I start talking about Plato tomorrow and I talk like Plato, that's the idea. Okay, because Plato will talk about, you know, the good and the pure forms and so on and so forth. And I like Plato as well. Plato was good for that head person, the person who just puts head all the way, and it's like head and everything else is below. That's how Plato's arrangement would be. It's all mind, and then everything else is equally crap underneath that. Okay? So that way of thinking would say the truth is out there, the truth can be ascertained, there is a world of forms, there's a world of platonic ideals, blah, blah, blah. This says, no, it's just stomach fighting with brain, fighting with sex organs, fighting with the spiritedness and the passion and the competition. This is just a fight of will against will, blindly fighting. And it is up to you to forge out of this matter, out of this raw material, out of this clay and marble, a soul that is ordered. Good news is most of it you don't really have a choice in, because you already have a psychology. You already have predispositions. One of the main things being said here is that psychology is more important than the pre-Nietzschean philosophers gave credit to. In other words, Nietzsche was one of the first psychologists. One of the first psychologists. When I come through the door, I'll be bringing in the microphone. Damn it, since I've been here before. When I leave out the back, I'll be leaving with a microphone. Spitting melodies on the track. Ask my cousins where they at. They be chilling with a microphone. Keeping honeys buzzing on the track. Revolutionary sound. Spirit and the microphone. Everybody now. Young Swift. Let's hear you. When I come through the door, I'll be bringing in a microphone. Damn it, since I've been here before. When I leave out the back, I'll be leaving with a microphone. Spitting melodies on the track. Ask my cousins where they at. They be chilling with a microphone. It's another unreleased track. You may already guess what the name of the track is. It's called Microphone. A little bit of a hip-hop style. I'm like a man, I'm like a god, I'm like an angel, a demon, I'm like the rustle of the winds and the sounds of screaming, I'm like the burning desire, the fire that we require, steady mind we admire when situations are dire, the wire straight to the amplifier, acoustic sounds from the anti-choir, we pipes with strings, with keys and voices, we gather around the mic and make joyful noises. Come through the door, I'll be bringing in a microphone. Damn it, since I've been here before. When I leave out the back, I'll be leaving with a microphone. Spitting melodies on the track. Ask my cousins where they at. They be chilling with a microphone. Keeping her knees buzzing on the track.
On the shore, relentless in the war, the legions in our hearts, shed waters in our voice, the spirit and the flesh, the emotions that arrest, the cerebral will contest, propelling the unrest. Preachers and bandits with means underhanded, the teachers pedantic and lack understanding, so sweep out the sand with the broom in your hand, stand up, make we burn Babylon, guess I can give the world to you, but the falling of the curtain is for certain, be careful where you lurking, demon searching, the spirit and the women fight the battle within, cause I can give the world to you, but the falling of the curtain is for certain, be careful where you're lurking, demon searching, the spirit and the women fight the battle within. With the semblance of a blaze, with gratitude and rage, we touch another page with delirious delight, impervious to light. This vitality and might encourages the flight. Preachers and bandits with means underhanded, the teachers pedantic and lack understanding. So sweep out the sand with the broom in your hand. Stand up, make we burn Babylon. Guess I can give the world to you, but the falling of the curtain is for certain. Be careful where you're lurking, demon searching, the spirit and the women fight the battle within. Guess I can give the world to you, but the falling of the curtain is for certain. Be careful where you're lurking, demon searching, the spirit and the women fight the battle within. But the falling of the curtain is for certain. Be careful where you're lurking, demon searching, the spirit and the women fight the battle within. Cause I can give the world to you, but the falling of the curtain is for certain. Be careful where you're lurking, demon searching, the spirit and the women fight the battle within.
I travel by night and I travel by day. I feel the breeze, I feel the call, and I see the gravel and the grass by the way. I hear birds and they're mating call. The toll on the road is a small price to pay, small price to pay for the saving of the race. That's so I say, people, what you waiting for? Take one and leave one and take it to go. Make a decision and get on the road. Open your vision for the sun to shine on. Bamboo and acorn and a letter I wrote. Big ones and small ones and a pipe for a soap. The rhythms of time is the horse I ride on. I travel by night and I travel by day. Feel the breeze, I feel the call, and I see the gravel and the grass by the way. I hear birds and People, what you waiting for? Will there be raindrops and rainbows so clear? Perhaps some snow angels, maybe a bear. Anticipation in the heart casts a fog upon the road. How far till the train stop? I wish I was there. I glance at the paper just to be clear. All the coming and the going that will be once was foretold. I travel by night and I travel by day. Feel the breeze, I feel the call. And I see the gravel and the grass by the way. I hear birds and their mating call. The toll on the road is a small price to pay. A small price to pay for the saving of the race. And so I say, aye, 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 aye. People, what you waiting for? Sha-na-na-na-no, sha-na-na-na-ne, sha-na-na-na-no, sha-na-na-na-ne, sha-na-na-na-na-na-na-na-na-na-na-no, sha-na-na-na-no, sha-na-na-na-ne, sha-na-na-na-no, sha-na-na-na-ne, sha-na-na-na-na-na-na-na-na-na-na-na. I travel by night and I travel by day. Feel the breeze, I feel the call. And I see the gravel and the grass by the way. I hear birds and their mating call. The toll on the road is a small price to pay. A small price to pay for the saving of the race. And so I say, aye, 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 aye. People, what you waiting for?